will start tomorrow.
No.
Bobby took a
Fantasy
deep
and
breath,
sci-fi.
and a faint green glow appeared as he opened his palms. Having inner strength, he could instantly kill a fighter of the third rank. Now, his strength was not that of a quasi-martial artist anymore. It was that of a half-step martial artist. A quasi-martial artist could easily defeat a normal third rank in one or two moves, and would even be a threat towards a deadly beast, such as the golden-headed tiger. However, once one reached the point of a half-step martial artist, one's strength exceeded that of quasi-martial artists considerably. Bobby could now even exchange a few blows with the golden-headed tiger himself. The biggest difference
Oh
between him and
damn.
martial artists was not body strength.
That ain't gonna be
Instead,
enough to
it
get
was the
me
amount of his chi.
get
At
me
night, in
goddamn
a
what's the
certain
name.
garden at the
So
facility,
I guess
a sword was drawn from
I
its sheath and created illusions in the air. The
I
sword's
guess I
owner
go back to the
was a
White
boy
House
dressed
and
in purple. The power of his sword
go
had
do
reached a
the
frightening level.
freaking
His casual
let's
strikes could
see,
be compared with the deadly skill
projects.
of wind-thrusted sword, which could kill students of the third rank in one move. Peter,
What is
not
this?
bad. You have already trained your cracking fierce sword to a high level.
Oh, so I need to go
One of the
donate.
town recruits. It is probably only you who have trained the high-rank martial art to a high level. The middle-aged man said, smiling. The purple-clothed boy was Peter, who was ranked third amongst the town recruits.
Oh shit.
It looks like the first place among the townies will be changing soon.
I
And
gotta go
Bobby,
find
that bug,
some water.
I'll crush him under my feet. Peter said coldly.
I need to go do the summit now.
Suddenly executed 5 different glows.
30
The
floors.
strength he wielded would even shock true martial artists. Boy, your eyesight is limited. Do not just think about the townies. The middle-aged man shook his head. Your true opponents are the ones from the city. With your strength,
Yeah.
you can easily make it into the top 20. But you would be making me blush if you were able to make it into the top 10. Yes, Father. I'm 70% sure that I can make it to the top 10. Peter said confidently. In another building. Sarah, the preliminaries start tomorrow. How confident are you? A one-armed old man asked, as he smiled. Do not worry, grandfather. I have complete confidence that no one amongst the town recruits is my match. Sarah's face glowed warmly as she smiled. You need only worry about Peter. As for Jacob, his forte is defense, so he should not be able to threaten you too much. The one-armed old man analyzed. Peter? Maybe. Being one of the facility's geniuses, there was no one who could enter her eyes. However, she did not know why that boy kept appearing in her mind. That person was not even ranked in the top 10 amongst the town recruits. But she could not get him off her mind. Also, if you enter the finals and meet Calvin, who is ranked first, do not be stubborn. After all, he is the most powerful one amongst the students here, the old man warned. At the same time, in a magnificent structure. Jacob, Tom, both of you have to perform well in this year's contest. Especially you, Jake. Your strength has reached that of a quasi-martial artist. With that, you should aim for the top 10. An arrogant voice sounded. Yes, Father. With my strength, even Calvin, who was ranked first amongst the town recruits, is not my match. Jacob said, casually. Tom, who was standing next to him, said, Bobby, I have reached the orange belt now, and have trained 13 changes of the poisonous snake to the first 6 stages. I will beat you at this contest this time. Even some of the elders were anticipating the coming event. Countless students were rubbing their palms together for tomorrow's fight. Everyone waited eagerly for the chance to change their destiny. The morning the next day, just as the sky turned bright, a lot of people came into view as they gathered at the martial arts events field. Many of those who arrived were students or teachers at the facility, and a few of them were the parents of the fighters taking part. the number of students that arrived increased. However, most of them were town recruits. There were not many city students that showed up. The martial arts events field had 10 stages, all over them with a surface area of 100 meters. Bobby did not find it weird, as there would first be preliminaries. The preliminaries started with the town recruits. 50 of them would then face off against the other new city recruits. The point of this was to eliminate the weak townies, leaving just the elites behind. This meant that the older city students did not need to enter the preliminaries. They only had to wait for the final tournament. That was half a month later. Finally, around 20 new city students came by. These had determined expressions on their faces as they looked towards the outer disciples. Look, it's Vanessa. She's ranked 4th amongst the city's new recruits. She's here. The crowd went dead silent. She was one of the main focuses of the inner disciples. She had a clear face and a quiet attitude. As Bobby inspected the girl with his left eye, he found out that she had inner strength that was weaker than his own. Martial artist. This Vanessa has reached the 4th rank already. Bobby sucked in the cold breath. Although he knew that the city's new recruits had incredible talent, it was higher than he expected. If Vanessa, who was ranked 4th, already had a strength of a 4th rank, then how strong would Del Mogos, who was 1st, be? I heard that Vanessa's strength is only weaker than the strength of Dale, Breton, and Chi-Chi. And that is one step below the 4 great geniuses of San Francisco. First place Dale, 2nd place Chi-Chi, 3rd place Breton. None of them are here. Calvin, who was 1st amongst the town recruits, felt his expression turn ugly. It was obvious that none of them felt that it was worth watching their matches. Their strength and rank had reached an unwavering point. Perhaps they would only be seen at the final tournament. Half an hour later, a voice sounded throughout the field. The family sparring contest starts now. Today are the preliminaries, and only the town recruits will participate. Only 50 of the 522 people will proceed to the final tournament.
Dear listener, now playing the next audio series.
Derek Esposito's life wasn't good or bad. It was a perfectly average, insignificant existence. Well, maybe it tended to be a little more towards bad most of the time. His father was bipolar, disappearing into his bedroom for days on end during a depressive phase. He'd only come outside to eat, use the bathroom, and engage in the occasional bout of rageful violence against his unlucky sons. When he was euphoric, Derek's father worked like a madman. He had limitless ambition, but unfortunately, he lacked both business and social skills. That meant all his projects were doomed to failure. Whenever he decided to actually take his medication, Derek's dad was a couch potato that would only go to work to avoid looking bad in front of the neighbors. In sickness or in health, though, he was the textbook example of an abusive father. His sons were a disgrace in his eyes. They never studied hard enough, they lacked discipline and respect, and he was always there to remind them how useless they were. He would yell at them for the slightest mistake, saying that they were parasites that leached off his hard work. And when words weren't enough, there was no teacher like his leather belt. Derek and Carl quickly learned how to fend for themselves. Their absent-minded mother had ignored them right after giving birth, choosing instead to live shut away in her bedroom as far as possible from her spouse's tantrums. Derek was the older brother by 2 years. As such, he tried his best to take care of his little brother. They grew up watching shows and reading stories about heroes who protected the weak and upheld justice. But no hero ever appeared to save them. Every week they were forced to go to church to worship a benevolent God and his son, the savior of all mankind. But no matter how much they prayed or how good they were, no miracle occurred to make their lives better. God and his son were too busy for the Esposito kids. They stopped believing in heroes. Instead of wasting time with prayers, they studied. School was their one refuge, but even that couldn't last forever. Once they hit middle school, it didn't even take a month before the bullying started. Their cheap clothes and sullen attitudes made them easy targets. They were so used to being tossed around and insulted that they didn't even bother trying to fight back. Derek's life hadn't been pleasant before this. After a month of the new torture, he knew he couldn't take it. He tried to make things better. He reported his father's abuses to social services with an anonymous email, but the overworked social worker made a brief visit to their place and never came back. Then Derek tried to end the bullying by reporting the aggressors to a teacher, who reported it to the principal. The principal didn't want to bother with what he deemed childish pranks, so he called Derek's parents to inform them of the problem, hoping he wouldn't hear about it again. At least his wish came true. Derek took an extra beating for not being man enough to face his own problems. Are you an idiot? Haven't I taught you anything? Never delegate. If you want something done right, do it yourself, his father yelled. Derek had never felt so helpless and desperate. That night, he bawled his eyes out until he fell asleep. The next day, he felt different, clear-headed like never before. Despair was useless. He needed a plan. It would take years to realize that something inside of him had died. He was no longer able to trust, hope, or develop any kind of kinship. He was surrounded by enemies, and to survive, Derek needed to be able to fight back. Derek asked his father to let him join a dojo and learn martial arts. To his surprise, he didn't have to beg. His old man was glad his wimpy excuse for a child was finally interested in becoming a man. His only condition was that Derek couldn't quit for at least 1 year, otherwise he'd have to pay for it himself. Not only did Derek start practicing Aikido, he'd also wake up 2 hours early every single day to do push-ups, squats, sit-ups, and run until he was out of breath. In a few months, he was able to do 100 push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, and run for at least 5 miles before going to school. Aikido turned out to be a perfect solution for his situation. Low-level training was mainly focused on self-defense, but there was plenty of space for attacking and fighting dirty. By practicing martial arts, he finally discovered something he was good at. He was not particularly nimble, nor a fast learner. His hand-to-eye coordination was average at best. His talent lay in the ability to pinpoint when and how to hit someone, or block a defensive maneuver. Derek was always able to grasp the killing moves on his first try, sometimes even before the sensei completed the practical demonstration. It was an exciting, yet disappointing discovery, since his only talent had no practical use. Even if Aikido tournaments could make him money, hits to the groin, eyes, and trachea were universally forbidden. For months, Derek kept training hard while keeping a low profile at school, planning his next move. As the first semester ended, Derek stopped hiding from the bullies. He started zinging back every insult they threw at him. Derek never went to the bathroom alone, always keeping eyes on a nearby adult. He gave them no opportunities to ambush him. After a full day of sassing back, Derek's enemies were outraged. That's when he made his move. "I've had enough of your shit," he told them. "Meet me in an hour behind the grocery store between Lincoln and 3rd. Unless you're scared. You got a death wish, bitch? You're on. The fight's just between you and the 3 of us, alright? No extra help." Derek nodded, though he knew they were lying, and he was right. When the bullies came to the fight, they brought along 2 extra people. Derek was waiting for them, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "There you are. I was starting to think you stood me up. They laughed. Sorry we're late. We needed to invite a couple more guests to the party. You don't mind, do you? Derek shrugged. No problem. Trash is trash. I chose this alley because it's equipped with enough dumpsters to accommodate all your friends. The last line hit a nerve. They charged at him blindly. Don't let him escape. Let's show him who's the trash. They fell into his trap. Derek had prepared the terrain, choosing his spot carefully. A dead-end alley wouldn't allow them to escape, and it was so dim they couldn't see the tripwire he'd installed. The first two tripped and fell down hard on the concrete. Those behind them were so surprised, they never saw the lead pipe coming. Derek had come fully prepared. He used the pipe to beat them on the head, the side of the knee, even in the groin. When he'd finished with those three, he started hitting the two that were struggling to get back on their feet. When he had them all moaning and sobbing on the ground, he used a small knife to cut the tripwire. Then he beat them again and again with the lead pipe, paying special attention to the nether regions. Derek knew this was wrong, but he didn't care. If the world was unfair, he had to make it unfair in his favor. He took out the taser he'd stolen from his father and tased them until they were unconscious. Then he stripped them, took out a marker, and drew Dixon words like loser and jackass all over their bodies. He took multiple photos of them. When he'd finished, he splashed them with a cold bucket of water and woke them up. Sorry to ruin your nap, but I need your attention. The bullies woke up in so much pain they barely noticed they were naked and covered in drawn dicks. When they could focus, Derek showed them the images on his phone. I made quite the scrapbook, even a short movie. The files are uploaded to my computer now. Wouldn't it be terrible if someone like, I don't know, me, was to upload them to the internet? You know what they say, the internet never forgets. The bullies started crying and begging. Whenever someone searches your names, be it your grandma, your girlfriends, even some job you wanted, these photos would be the first thing to appear. Dude, no! Please, I don't even know you! It was a favor for a friend! It was only a joke, please! Their cowardice gave him goosebumps. Derek wanted to puke at their weakness. From this day on, you leave me alone. And you better pray that nothing happens to me. Because if I don't enter the password on these photos every day, they'll automatically upload. With that, he turned and walked away. Then he whirled around once more. Almost forgot. I threw your clothes in the dumpsters. Can't remember whose is where. If you don't want to go home with your dicks hanging out, you better start digging. So long, suckers. Derek returned home euphoric. He had never felt so proud of himself. Confidence that he could forget those jerks forever.
What?
Confidence that he could do anything with his life.
Gave him to you. Gave him to you.
Oh no.
The bullying ended, but Derek's social life never improved. How could he possibly make any friends when his family was such an epic disaster? He hid the bruises he got from his father with long sleeves, and soon enough, he was out of plausible excuses to explain the continuous rotation of black eyes. Derek shouldn't have worried, though. No one at school actually cared about the abuse. Caring would have been too much effort. His classmates and teachers simply pretended not to notice how beat up he was. Derek liked to pretend their apathy was due to his own skills as a liar, but deep in his heart he felt bitter and hateful. No one cared about him. No one ever would. Except Carl. Life was painful but manageable so long as Derek had his little brother. Carl was his family, sole friend, and confidant. He was Derek's whole world. But soon enough, adolescence hit in full force, and Derek started having crushes on girls. First love was supposed to be a wonderful thing in a person's life, but not for Derek. Once again, He felt utterly helpless. He couldn't get close to anyone he liked because he knew he couldn't bring anyone home to hang out or meet his parents. He couldn't open up. He couldn't ask a girl to the movies or to hang out after school. Derek was tormented by the cruel futility of his life. Often he'd lie awake at night demanding an answer from God himself. Why couldn't Derek know love or happiness? Why did other people get to enjoy what was only an impossible dream for him? Derek's rage started increasing. He had trouble sleeping at night, thinking about all the couples in the world, thinking how lovey-dovey they were, and how he'd never get to know what that felt like. Derek knew he was different. His fatal flaw wasn't being shy or having a bad case of acne. No doctor could cure his affliction. His disease was a life sentence. It had a name and a surname. Ezio Esposito, his trash bag of a father. Derek started concocting plans to get rid of his father, even if that meant killing the bastard. At night, he would lie awake and devise elaborate scenarios that often involved prolonged torture. He would make Ezio suffer like Derek had for all these years. But when morning came, Derek would always realize it was wishful thinking. Just a dumb plan. Derek was angry, but he wasn't ruthless enough to murder his own father. He remained an angry teenager, nothing more. He didn't have the means to carry out his plans anyway. At least, he didn't have the means to do it and not get caught. Kill Ezio? Sure. And what then? Live a whole life racked with guilt? Run away from home to avoid being arrested? Run away with what money? Killing Ezio would mean abandoning Carl and destroying any possible chance of future happiness.
What's that stuff on the table?
So every morning,
Oh no.
Derek would swallow his homicidal plan
Oh,
along
there's
with his
paint.
breakfast and
Face
milk.
paint.
For who?
His only
It
real
doesn't matter, you
prospect
can
for
use
a
it.
better life was to cram like a madman, get a scholarship, and get out of this hell as fast as possible. Time passed quickly, and soon it was the summer before Derek's freshman year of high school. Despite the hot weather, his heart was cold as ice. Derek had finally hit his growth spurt. Combined with his martial arts training and muscle development, he now looked lean and mean. Ezio became aware that his elder son was a real threat now. Ezio was a bully, but he was a smart and cowardly one. The old man took to avoiding Derek as much as possible, making Carl the new favorite target for abuse. Derek tried standing up for his brother, but it was no use. Ezio bought a nightstick from the local army surplus and beat Carl harder than ever. "What the hell are you doing?" Derek yelled, trying to wrestle the stick away from his louse of a father. Ezio struck him across the face with the nightstick, rattling Derek's brain. "You boys need to learn some damn respect. I'll kill you if you don't shape up," Ezio snarled. Derek had been helpless to get it to stop. Ezio might have beaten Carl to death if the ruckus hadn't alarmed the neighbors. Derek had looked after Carl that night, realizing that if he wasn't prepared to kill Ezio, he couldn't stand up to him. It would make everything worse. So whenever Ezio threw one of his tantrums, Derek had to stand back and watch his brother getting beaten. He comforted Carl and helped ease the swelling, but he was useless. Derek would sit in bed at night and think about how he was going to get them out of this. He knew one thing for certain. If things didn't change soon, either Ezio was going to die, or Derek was. Then one morning, Ezio got a phone call from one of his old army buddies. The man worked for a company that was hiring with an eye toward quick promotion. If Ezio landed this job, he might start climbing the corporate ladder for real. "Finally, my ship's coming in," he told his sons. Derek and Carl only nodded and ate quietly. He didn't really want to hear them speak. Ezio went and put on his best suit despite the heat. He and Derek prepared his briefcase and laptop. "You need to show up prepared in this world," Ezio told Derek. You should learn from my example. Don't be a bum your whole life. Okay, Derek said, even though Ezio was the biggest bum he knew. Ezio was in a real hurry. He ran to the elevator, pushing the button like a madman, but the light remained red. Someone on the top floor was taking a long time getting into the car. Cursing the condo, the building manager, and his own rotten luck, Ezio rushed for the stairs. Derek stood in their doorway and watched his father. And that's when Derek noticed how the hallway floor reflected the light in odd ways. The floor looked wet. Derek realized that the janitor had just washed the hallway, but had forgotten to put up the wet floor sign. That was dangerous. Someone could slip and really hurt themselves. Even die. Derek smiled. Yes, at last. It happened all in an instant. Ezio was just starting down the stairs when his foot slipped. Derek could have warned him. He could have rushed over to grab his father. But instead, he stayed put and watched nature run its course. Ezio tumbled down the stairs, going down several flights as he screamed. At the bottom of the steps, his body was a broken mess, all his limbs bent at unnatural angles. Derek grabbed his phone and took several photos to prove that the floor was wet and there was no warning sign. Already, he planned on hiring the best shark law firm he could find and suing the building management firm. Only then did he carefully walk down the stairs to confirm Ezio's death. His father lay there, incapable of speech, his eyes fixated on Derek. He was silently begging for help. Derek grinned. Haven't I learned from your example, old man? You're the one who said I should never delegate. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Wasn't that how it went? Your phone's in your pocket. Take it out and call 911. I'm a useless dumbass after all. I don't want to screw up calling for help, Daddy. Ezio's eyes were full of shock and hate. Then his head went limp, his gaze blank. Derek suppressed gleeful laughter. Instead, adopted his best terrified son expression and started shouting for help. When the ambulance arrived, he made sure to squeeze out a few tears. They comforted him, believing he'd done everything he could to save his father. Bunch of idiots. As always, Derek's mother was too obsessed with her problems and feelings to bother looking for a lawyer to manage their lawsuit. She left everything in Derek's hands. That's how he was able to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. After careful research, he contacted and hired the best lawyer they could afford. Derek also arranged to be the client instead of his mother. Mr. Thompson looked surprised to be dealing with a young teenager. You're sure your mother can't help you out, son? My mother hasn't lifted a finger for me since the day I was born. I want her looked after, since she gave me life and all. But I don't want to see her again when this is over. He told Mr. Thompson everything. Derek spoke about his father's accident, the abuse the boys had suffered over the years, and the need to split the settlement money 3 ways. 1 portion would go to their mother, 1 to Derek, 1 to Carl. Both kids were very firm on 1 special point. They wanted the lawyer to start the process to get them emancipated. With the money from the settlement and Ezio's life insurance policy, they had enough to be self-sufficient until Derek grew up. What followed was the happiest period in their life. Before long, they were emancipated minors with cash in their pockets. They moved away from their mother's place and never saw her again. Derek doubted she even noticed they were gone. They used their portion of the money to settle up and make proper plans for the future. Over the following years, bullies weren't a problem. Derek and Carl both became martial artists and had each other's backs. Having their own place allowed them to experience having friends and girlfriends over. Their domestic nightmare was finally a thing of the past. They suffered many disappointments, though. Too many so-called friends only wanted to use their parent-free house as a party den. They also struggled with being normal teens. While their peers only wanted to party and skip class, the boys focused on studying and saving as much as possible. Derek and Carl would work part-time jobs during holidays and vacations to keep themselves afloat. They weren't poor, but not rich either. They knew they had to save as much as possible for a rainy day, but they had a good life. Derek got a scholarship and obtained a bachelor degree in chemistry, soon followed by a master's in biochemistry. Carl did well too. He got his engineering degree, was studying for his master's, and already had a fiancée. Despite being really happy for his little brother, seeing Carl in love was a painful thorn in Derek's side. He had always been the more socially inept of the two. He never managed to get into a stable relationship, not even in college. Derek had problems talking to girls. The problem lay in his inability to trust. He had many crushes, but never fell in love. At the beginning, he blamed bad luck, or thought the girls shallow. After finding and losing more than one good girl, he blamed his past. But Carl's own success in love made Derek blame himself. Carl had suffered the same things, but he'd come out of it stronger and purer than Derek. Derek was just too scared of being hurt again. That fear was one enemy he could just never beat up. Derek accepted a decent job working the night shift at a big chemical company. Carl had told him that he wanted to marry his fiancée as soon as he got his master's. That gave Derek 2 years to save enough money to give his little brother a decent wedding. Derek didn't like his job, but it was a way to start his career. Also, it was well paid, and he resolved to use the company insurance to seek psychological counseling. He knew he had problems and wanted to work on them. Derek consulted several doctors before finding someone he felt was a good fit. After several months, he was finally starting to make progress. But alas, such happiness could not last. It was a Friday evening, and Derek was getting ready to go to work. He was still stuck working the night shift because the pay was too good. Maybe he could have gotten a job he liked better somewhere else, but money was still too important. No matter how many times Carl said he wanted a small ceremony, Derek told him not to be cheap. But it's only a ceremony. The real thing's spending the rest of your life with someone, Carl had said. We haven't had a ton to celebrate in our lives, Carl. I want you to have the kind of wedding you deserve. You've overcome too much shit to cut corners in the best parts of your life. You've always been such a romantic, dude. Carl had laughed and punched Derek's arm. Yeah, romantic. Sure, right. But Derek meant it when he said he wanted Carl to have everything good in this world. Derek looked at the magnet on the fridge as he walked through the kitchen adjusting his tie. It said save the date in big yellow letters over a picture of Carl and his fiancée hugging on a hiking trail. Derek smiled. Whenever he saw his little brother looking happy, he felt his life had been worth something after all. Derek was just shrugging on his jacket when his phone went off. The ringtone wasn't one he recognized. That meant it wasn't a pre-programmed number. Usually that meant it was a spam call, and Derek was ready to hang up and let it roll to voicemail. But something about the number gave him pause. The area code looked local, which was unusual for a spammer. Derek felt a lump in his gut he couldn't explain, and picked up the call. Derek Esposito, who is it? Mr. Esposito, this is the St. Joseph Hospital. The female voice sounded worried. Her concern, along with the word hospital, sent a shiver down his spine. Sir, is Carl Esposito your brother? She asked. Derek could almost hear her biting her lip. She was seriously worried. Yes, what happened? He was involved in a car accident and is in critical condition. You should come down here as soon as possible. The doctors need you since you're his healthcare proxy, and the patient is unconscious. A car accident? Derek rushed out the door and looked for a cab on the street. How the hell is that possible? We don't even own a car. What the hell happened? I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty to say. The doctors will explain. Derek hung up on her. He had no time for talk, only for a goddamn cab. Every second in traffic was torture. Derek called Carl's fiancée until he remembered she was out of town at a conference. He left her a voicemail, saying he hoped he'd have good news for her soon. When he finally arrived at the hospital, though, it was too late. The look on the doctor's face told him everything he needed to know. That it was all over. That his life was a complete wreck. What happened? Derek sat down. If he didn't sit, he'd collapse to the floor. Mr. Esposito was crossing the street when a driver took the corner too fast and hit him. In the crosswalk. How could the jackass not see my brother? We believe the man behind the wheel was intoxicated. Police are currently investigating. I'll pass you over to them soon. The police told Derek what the doctor had. A drunk driver had run over Carl and sped on, never looking back once. A bystander had called 911, but the bad traffic had caused a delay in the ambulance. That had shaved critical moments off Carl's chances of survival. It had been a hit and run. If that monster had stopped to help Carl, there was a good chance he'd have been alright. When Carl arrived at the hospital, he had already been in critical condition,